welcome everybody. We're going to start by the Pledge of Allegiance, everybody. If everybody could join me with the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to start by saying it's nice to be back here. The last time we had a candidates night with Republican, well, not a night, event with the Republican Town Committee was back in 2019. So it's glad that we joined together and everybody's back here once again. So thank you. I just want to acknowledge a few of the elected officials that are here today. We have two water wastewater commissioners, Noreen Donahue and Judith Underwood. Our Assembly of Delegate Representative, Elizabeth Harder. Our Library Trustee, Linda Sabula. And we're happy that the Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber of Commerce is with us, Cindy Williams. And our Library Director, Ginny Hewitt. Now, we all know this town runs on volunteers, so anybody who is a volunteer in this town in any committee, please stand up, please, because we depend on you. Volunteers, stand up. Okay, so speaking of volunteers, Peter Hughes is our moderator today. I got to do this 2019, so it's his turn. And speaking of volunteers, he served us as a selectman. Yeah. He is chair of the Finance Committee, and he has given a lot of his time to this town. So let's have a round of applause for Peter. Okay. Thank you. Phones off, right, everybody?
There you go, yeah, phone's off. This thing working? It's on? Okay. Yeah. We probably don't even need it, but anyhow. Hey, first of all, thank you all for coming. I know I recognize almost everybody here from two nights of town meeting. They went on and on and on. And that was just a few days ago. So we got through that town meeting, and now you're coming out on this beautiful day to listen to our candidates. We have 3 candidates for 2 seats on the Board of Selectmen. Unfortunately, we can't elect all 3 of them. It's just the way it is. They're very highly qualified candidates. You're going to hear from them in a moment. This is your one venue, I think, to really listen and to ask questions, if you will, and see what we can learn and help you determine in your own mind who you're going to vote for on May 16th, which is only 2+ weeks away. Okay? We're going to go through introductions and whatnot. We will pass out cards with numbers on them. And I'd just like, if anybody came thinking that they would like to ask a question of the candidates, not now, but later in the program, just raise your hand and we'll have the ushers give you a card. The card will have a number on it. When we get to that point in the program, I'll just ask consecutively, question number 1, simply stand up, ask your question directed to all 3 candidates, and we'll go from there, okay? So, if anybody thinks at the moment they want to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll have the ushers pass out some cards. Ray, do you have the cards?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, we're going to do it now.
Mary Ann, just passing. You got to do it in sequence, so we get 1, 2, 3, 4.
They're all mixed up. They pay.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if we don't get many questions, all right, we'll go from there. Go ahead, pass them on. Pass them on. It's going to be fun. All right. Now, having said that, the order in which the candidates will answer questions, we have this very scientific trade computer that we use to determine the order of responses, if you will, or presentations. 1, 2, or 3. The candidates met with me in secret up here 20 minutes ago, and we determined, first and foremost, that Pete Piekarski will be number 1, Don Howell number 2, and Jeff Handler will be number 3. I'll do my best to try and rotate that as we go forward, if I can keep track of it, so we'll do that, okay? And that's all I have to get going here. So we asked each of the candidates.
You want to
me to.
Oh, okay.
Tell her what
Let me get, we're gonna get to that in a second. We asked each of the candidates, and by the way, we sent them ahead of time, that they would have an opening statement, 3 to 5 minutes if they would like it, giving us some background information, bio, et cetera, and why you're running for select person. And then next we will ask, you know, what do you feel are the 3 most critical issues facing our town, and what makes you uniquely qualified to address them? Again, 3 to 5 minutes. Now, Chris Joyce down here in the front has a wonderful system of reminding all of us up here what the time is. Okay, so there she has, when you get to the 1 minute left mark, she will raise the 1 minute. When we get to 30 seconds, she'll do that. And then when she gets to stop, there's a little trap door here.
That's
Goes
right.
down into the basement, so you never want to get to stop. So with that, all right, I think we're ready to go. And so opening statements, we'll ask Pete Piekarski to give us his bio, background information, why you're running for selectman. Pete?
Excellent, thank you, good morning. Thank you to Ms. Ford, Mr. Gottwald, Mr. Hughes for volunteering, as well as the many others.
Thank you. I'm hard of hearing. Please, everybody use the microphone. Speak distinctly as much as you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will do. So again, Pete Piekarski, I am also known as the candidate who took a family vacation during the last forum, a vacation in which I will not apologize for taking. But with that said, a little bit about me. I'm a 20-plus year resident of the town of Harwich. I realize that makes me the relative newcomer up here on the stage. I am also a former Harwich selectman. I also sat on the housing committee for a brief period of time. And prior to moving to Harwich, I was an elected member of the school committee in the town of Avon, Mass. I have a 20-plus year history in banking. Currently, I'm with the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod. My primary focus over the past 20-plus years has been retail administration and physical security. And today, I'm a vice president with the Coop. I live in town, obviously, and I'm married to my wonderful wife, Chris, who's here with me today. Chris has been a teacher in the Harwich/Monomoy school system for 20-plus years, and I have the privilege of being a stepdad to 2 wonderful kids. I call them kids, but they're no longer kids. Dan is a police officer in the town of Harwich. He was fortunate enough to buy a home in town, and he lives here with his wife, Taryn. And my stepdaughter, she resides off Cape, works and lives off Cape with her fiance, Alex. So why am I running? Great question, and one I hear often from my wife. She is the smartest one in the relationship. The simple answer, I'm running because I can make a positive contribution to the board. My civic and professional background afford me the opportunity to hit the ground running. My desire to do what's in the best interest of Harwich without any hidden agenda will serve the residents well. My proven track record of being a fiscal conservative and my belief in an open and transparent government can only help balance the board. Additionally, I have real concerns about the economy. An economy that has not only seen record inflation, but has also seen the feds raise rates at historic pace. We continue on this roller coaster ride with the elimination of what I term the manufactured federal monies that in all likelihood exacerbated this inflation. The elimination of these monies, without a doubt, will reduce the historically high revenue surpluses at the state and local levels, not to mention have a direct impact on discretionary spending on the individuals that were relying on that income. The town of Harwich and the taxpayers will ultimately feel these reductions. My desire is to help minimize the potential tax implications and allow the fixed income and lifelong residents of Harwich to remain in their homes. For these reasons and many others is why I decided to run for office again. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Don Howell.
Oh,
You were number 2.
no,
You gotta get the mic in there.
morning, everyone. First, I'd like to start by thanking Peter and Ray. This is a great tradition, and I think it's wonderful that we're getting back to it again, where there are no political parties at the local level. So, I started out in the depths of the mid-20th century in New York State. I went to Fordham University, and I've been married for 48 years to a wonderful person who is an RN case manager at Cape Cod Hospital. We have 4 kids, and we're currently raising a 15-year-old as legal guardians, and she's terrific too. I started work as a senior contracting officer for the General Services Administration, and then I eventually moved over to the U.S. Marshals, where we wound up taking bad people's stuff and selling it. Well, it was an interesting job. And I'd like to say, and I believe it's true, I wasn't fortunate enough to be born here, but I was smart enough to move here. After that career, we picked up and moved here more than 30 years ago, and I opened up a store in Dennisport, which was self-aggrandizing. It was Don's one stop. And I like to think that you can't make much of a difference unless you show up. I've been devoted to public service in Harwich for over 30 years. I've volunteered with charitable groups like the Harwich Ecumenical Council for Housing, that's HESH, and Sight Loss Services at Cape Cod, both of which I'm currently chair of the board. I've also spent time as on the board of the Harwich Junior Theater, and I've served there as its president at one point. During those 3 decades, I've also been privileged to represent the townspeople of Harwich as a planning board member, the chair of the Charter and Bylaw Committee, the town's rep to the County Clean Water Board, and of course, 12 challenging years as a selectman. I've worked hard to bring balance to what some think of as competing interests. As one of the few remaining people who worked to establish the Six Ponds District of Critical Planning Concern, that's a DCPC, to protect our environment in Harwich, I also more recently worked with the residents of West Harwich to establish another DCPC to protect our history and reinvigorate the economy of that village. Yet over these same 30 years, I've also led efforts to establish over 150 housing units, and I have worked with others to provide even more. Rarely is one issue the only important issue, and I try to look at all sides of all issues in a balanced and respectful way. And that's what I've tried to do as a principal author of the town's late 1990s comprehensive plan, a plan which I might add that passed at town meeting unanimously and of which I was a principal author. Admittedly, sometimes I find myself at odds with others on the select board, but that's why we have a multi-member board. It's designed to respectfully represent differing viewpoints and to reach consensus. Whatever the challenge, I have been and I always will be there for all the citizens of Harwich, and humbly ask for one of your votes in this year's election on May 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Jeff?
Sure, and thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to Ray and Peter and everyone else who worked really hard to put on this important event. My name is Jeff Handler, and I'm running for selectman. I'd ask for both of your votes, but that would be a little greedy, so I'll just ask for one on May 16th. I was born and raised here in Harwich, and I'm 53 years old. My wife Sarah and I, we have 4 boys. 2 of them have made their way through the Monomoy school system, and 2 of them have just started in the Monomoy school system, and we just couldn't be happier about the school system that our boys are attending. When I was a young boy in Harwich growing up, I had an incredible benefit of being around some amazing people. And the common thread of those people was that they all owned small businesses. My father, Bob Handler, my grandfather, Louis Handler, Mr. Marshline, Don Bates, Dave Toby, Ms. Bonar. I could go on and on with the people that shaped my future. And small business is one of the main reasons I'm running for selectman. We need to protect it. We need to allow it to thrive in Harwich. And it taught me a few things. First, it taught me that I wanted to be a small business owner when I graduated college and I grew up. The second thing it taught me is how to become part of the fabric of our community, because that's truly what small business here in Harwich is, part of the fabric of the community. So in 1986, I graduated from Harwich High and I made my way to college. And in 1991, I graduated. And I made my way back home, which was a much easier task to do then than it is today. And I opened my small business. And 34 years later, in the space of health, wellness, and fitness, that business is still in operation, and I'm very, very proud of that, to have a small business for that long in the town of Harwich and Cape Cod, actually. And you may have remembered that in 2021, I ran for selectman and I lost by 28 votes, but who's counting, right? I had two choices at that time. I could either fold up my tent and lick my wounds and abandon my interest to serve our town, the town that had me grow up in it and gave me such incredible opportunity. My second choice was to double down and become more involved, and that's exactly what I did. So as I sit here today as the vice chair of the local planning committee, which is charged with developing Harwich's next local comprehensive plan, I feel I'm perfectly positioned to become a selectman. Now, a few things happened as a result of me being on that committee. The first is I got to meet some absolutely incredible people. And the second thing is I've learned an awful lot about our town. I'm more informed, more educated, and I'm a much stronger candidate than I was back in 2021, 20-something months ago. You could also find me coaching, as I was this morning before I came here, my 7-year-old in Little League Baseball. And I've been doing that since I was 18 years old. So we all have our special ways of giving back to our community. And the way I've always wanted to give back, and the way I thought I could give back most appropriately and with most value, was with the youth of our town. So why am I running? I am a lifelong resident. My family has 100+ years in this town. Harwich is in my veins. It's where we call home. It's where my family hopefully will always call home. I'm a homeowner. I'm a small business owner. I will promise to embrace the past, but plan for our future. So on May 16th, you know, you've got some good choices up here. But on May 16th, I'm going to ask for one of your votes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all three candidates. I learned something from each one of you hearing your presentation, so I think that's great and it's beneficial for everybody here. So now we're going to move on to the first question, and that is, what do you feel are the three most critical issues facing our town, and what makes you uniquely qualified to address those issues? And we'll go in the sequence that I mentioned. We'll rotate here. Don, you go first, Jeff second, and Pete third. So Don.
You want to stand?
No. Thank you, Pete. I thought about this, and it's tempting to say housing, housing, and housing, which a lot of people are saying at this point. But I have to say that I've always tried to pursue my time as a selectman and in other areas, understanding that there's a balance that needs to be struck between housing, the environment, and our history and culture. They're all important. And I've had this conversation with a number of you through the years. How you are able to balance them is really important. And as Pete alluded to, how you're able to afford doing things in each of these areas is really important. I have pursued and have been able to supply over 150 real houses in Harwich through the years, especially with my relationship with Hesh. But I also was involved, as I said earlier, with the DCPC for the Six Ponds District. It's extraordinarily important that we not just look at this as an opportunity to build more housing everywhere and forget about the unique environment that we have surrounding us. Which gets me to a real practical problem, which is the fourth problem that I wasn't asked about, but I'm going to volunteer, is sewering. Sewering, as it stands right now, without the state revising its plan, and I'll tell you how it's going to revise it in a second, already is projected to cost us $350 million across our 7,000 residences. It's very difficult to see how you could afford to do that, even spread out over 40 years with the amount of wealth that would need to be devoted to that. But moreover, the state is now looking at changing the trajectory from 40 years to 20. So that's halving the time. And it's asking to triple the hookups from what we were anticipated for $350 million to triple that. So the town, the little town of Harwich, that has 13,400 residents, and as I said, there's fewer residences because that's where, people live in family units, are expected to come up with $1.2 billion of sewering over 20 years. So I can assure you, I have been on that subject for quite some time. I'm the town's representative to the County Clean Waters Board, which allocates monies that came from one of the short-term stay taxes. And I've been able to get the town $5.5 million so far as part of its receipts from that fund. I can assure you that I wake up every day worrying about how to balance competing interests and how to be able to afford all of this. But as Jeff said, this town's been around for 300+ years. It's a wonderful place. We've always managed to figure out things on our own. We have a bunch of resilient people who live here, and I knew Mr. Marceline, and I personally was friends with Bobby Hour and a number of other iconic people. But we have a next generation of those people that are coming up who live here, who care deeply about the town, and how we utilize that talent, how we understand how to allocate our tax revenues, and how we treasure all of the things I talked about, housing, environment, and history and culture, is what's going to define us over the next generation as people who live in Harwich. Thank you.
Thank you, sure. The question is phrased, what's most important to me? But this isn't about me. This is about our townspeople. And as an elected official, our job is to represent the interests, the concerns, and the cares of our town and the people who live in it. So for me, in the 20+ months since my last run at Selectman, I've spoken to an awful lot of people in our town. So what has come across as important to them, clearly, is now what's important to me. And at the top of the list, our CWMP wastewater management plan is the one that gets talked about almost all the time, the most. And I'll touch on this briefly. The job of the elected officials, the job of Dan Pelletier, who is doing an unbelievable job with the rest of the Water Wastewater Committee, and our consultant, the jobs of those groups of people is to minimize the financial impact of the wastewater project. It's the long game. It's going to be here for a long time. The book will not be closed on our sewering project for decades. The second thing I hear an awful lot of, especially since town meeting, is the $77 million budget. What's next, Jeff? What's next year? What's the next year? What's our 5 years, the next 5 years look like? So I want to be part of sitting down and making sense of the next budget that our town creates. But I'm gonna jump on Don's back here a little bit and talk about housing. Because housing tends to bring it all together like a big puzzle. Housing is going to affect our wastewater. It's going to affect our environment. It's going to affect our school system. It's going to affect how our town can operate economically. So with that being said, I look at the Marceline property, and almost 700 days since we've owned that property, and we don't have an RFP out yet. By any standard in any measure, that is not success. By any standard or by any measure, I don't think anybody would ever say that that is a success. If my numbers are right, they may be a little off, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. I've done an awful lot of digging, learning, and educating myself lately, but I think in the last 7 to 8 years, we've only committed and created 9 new homes. I believe that's the Habitat for Humanity properties. 9 in 8 years. I might be a little off. But that again, for a town that talks housing, 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 it is by no standard or measure, we are not doing the job we should be doing with respect to our housing. So that would be absolutely the third, if not first or second, depending on who I'm speaking to. Obviously, we have different demographics in this town. But those 3 things, our wastewater management plan, being fiscally responsible, our housing plan, which hasn't moved the needle in 700 days, and our taxes, $77 million. And then I think part of the question was, why do I feel I am qualified or uniquely qualified to handle these issues for our town? Well, as the vice chair of the local planning committee, as I stated earlier, the amount of education and information that I've received in the last year has been unbelievable. And I am in real time understanding exactly the challenges our town is facing right now. So to be able to take that next step to the select board and be a part of a board that is designed to represent and be committed to representing the voices of our town's people and not my agenda. You won't hear the word I from me ever. You'll hear the word our and yours. Because that's exactly what those 5 seats are designed to do. They're designed to represent all of you. So I feel I'm ready to make that next step to the select board and be your voice. Thank you.
Pete?
Thank you. Sorry about the noise in the mic. Over the past few weeks, thankfully not months, speaking with various people in town as I began this campaign, I would agree, depending on who you asked, what their demographics look like, you may get a different response. But it seems as if we all share the similar thought process as we sit up here. I'd probably lead with budget, 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 if it were up to me, because ultimately everything ties back to the budget. But I would list them as budget, wastewater, and housing. Budget. As I already mentioned, I have real concerns with the overall economy and the impact that pandemic funds will ultimately have on our town. These funds have artificially supported the federal, state, municipal, and personal expenses. The elimination of these funds are all but certain to impact our local economy and the town's taxpayers. So although having the ability to add 10 new positions this fiscal year without an override may not concern some, it certainly concerns me. Because supporting these new employees and existing employees during a less robust economy will potentially affect the fixed income and lifelong residents of Harwich. I want to be part of the team that helps minimize that impact. Wastewater. 50 million here, 10 million there, 2 million there. All of a sudden, it's real money. Personally, I'd like to see the town push back on the total amount of sewer being proposed or recommended by the state, along with the repayment period. Truthfully, honestly, I'm not a huge proponent of sewers. I do understand how placing sewers within the town can be helpful in certain parts of town. Nevertheless, I don't see the need to install sewers at the rate in which is being recommended. Additionally, I don't understand or agree with the need to have such an aggressive payback period. If we can take advantage of low to no interest financing, it'd be advantageous to extend the terms and push back against the state mandates. Once again, every 50, 70, $100 million spent on sewers has a negative impact on our fixed income and lifelong residents. I do not want to see these folks forced out of their homes because of tax implications. And housing. Just as I don't want to see lifelong residents forced from their homes because of taxes, I want to collaborate with housing experts to find ways in which we can make housing affordable and realistic for the younger generations. Clearly, folks, there's no magic wand, there's no simple solution. This has been an issue for as long as I can remember. It was an issue when I last served. And it isn't an issue just impacting Harwich. I truly believe that through teamwork, collaboration, and a desire, a true desire, we can make improvements. ADUs are part of the solution, but not the total solution. Zoning and regulation will be part of the discussion. Creativity will need to be part of the discussion. A willingness to go outside the norm will need to be part of the discussion. And a realization that we can transform buildings and areas within town without negatively impacting our character or resources is achievable. Why am I qualified? I'm uniquely qualified to address these issues and more because I have previous experience serving in local government. I am open to healthy debate and dialogue, and I have a professional background in building teams to help achieve desired goals. Thank you.
Okay, what's that?
Number one's on.
Number one, we're giving out all the cards.
We went up to 15, right?
Okay, great. So this is the point in which you get to ask questions, and we have passed out cards numbered 1 through 15, anticipating we would get to potentially 15 questions. We'll see how that goes. We're going to take them in order, 1 through whatever. And each candidate, again, will keep rotating here. So when we get the questions, Jeff, you'll have the first question.
Thank you.
Each second, and Dawn third on the first question, and we'll just keep rolling it, if you will. No more than 2 minutes apiece. The shorter and briefer we can be, the more questions we can get to, which I think is always helpful.
Agreed.
So who is question number 1? Would you stand up, please identify yourself? We promise we won't send anybody to your house and do anything.
Oh, I can forget.
Okay.
Kathleen Tian, 3 Pleasant Avenue, Harwichwood. Who is your favorite president and why?
The question is, who is your favorite president?
Sure.
I guess of the United States.
Sure.
I'm assuming just for clarity.
Yeah, of the United States, correct?
And why?
Sure,
Jeff,
sure.
you get that one first.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Kathleen. Although I was not alive, but Mr. Kennedy, I think, was absolutely, John F. Kennedy was my favorite president. Through my school years of learning and understanding what he was all about, I believe he was visionary. I believe he took great care for both sides of the aisle. I think he was collaborative. I think he had civil dialogue. I think he was very interested in working with anybody and everybody who would be interested in listening and working with him. So yeah, John F. Kennedy would be my choice. Thank you.
Great. Pete?
Ronald Reagan.
Reagan?
Ronald Reagan, correct.
Why?
Again, I think we could echo some of the things that Jeff said about Mr. Kennedy, but I think he was a true visionary. I think he was able to communicate to other world leaders in a way in which hasn't probably been done since, and was able to accomplish some great things, not only for the United States, but for the globe.
Don?
I'm starting to feel like the old guy here, given who I'm going to say.
Washington?
No, I wasn't. Oh, come on now. I wasn't hanging with him, but
Who was before him?
John Adams. He had no estate. He was an average guy that, through education, got to where he got in life. And he had a true partnership with his wife, where nothing would have ever occurred. I mean, seriously, she ran the farm while he was off gallivanting in Europe. But of all of the founding fathers, he was probably the average man. And I respect that, because that is the dream, is that you're born and you don't have a lot of wealth around you, but through hard work and education, you get to where you're going. And he was an outstanding author. He wrote our Constitution in Massachusetts. And for all those reasons, I really respect John Adams.
Thank you. All right, question number 2.
Charles Fuska, 6 Teaberry Ave. You've all mentioned the direct connection to Monomoy Regional School District. Currently, the budget of the Monomoy Regional School District enables the district to maintain enviable class sizes and meet almost all of the identified needs of the school district. How important is it to the town to be able to maintain that? How important an issue is this in the campaign? Do you think that the current funding formula, the regional agreement, will enable Harwich to afford to be able to maintain the level that we're currently at well into the future. And if you don't think it's able to, what's the role of the board and what needs to be done about that?
Okay, so a school topic, and the order of answer will be Pete, Don, and Jeff.
I have to go home after this meeting, so of course I support it. No. The reality is, of course, I support the schools. Without strong schools, without good schools, you know, the community suffers. I think I'll jump around a little bit on your answer. When it comes to the funding formula, I don't believe there's ever been a regional district created that both sides, or however many groups were involved, agreed on the formula in place. And I don't suspect that the residents of Harwich, the leadership in Harwich, will necessarily agree with the formula that's in place now, or even as it changes down the road. Education is expensive. I scrutinize every budget, the town budget, the school budget, my own budget. So my goal would be to work collaboratively with the school committee, the other elected officials in town, to look for ways in which we can either minimize spending or maximize resources, or a combination of both, to deliver the same product without a negative impact on the students.
Thank you. Don?
Thanks, Pete. Well, I think I've made it abundantly clear that I care about education. I have a record up here where I've said things in the past, so I'm not going to run away from them. The district presupposed a more equal partnership, and the way that the formula for funding it came about was premised on the fact that we wouldn't be that disparate in our enrollments. Where we're at right now, and I know we started working on this when Steve Ford was around on the board, and he and I had quite a few discussions about this. We have to be able to maintain the district, but we also have to be able to focus on the possibility that other things can happen. You could base the formula not on just the mere number of kids, but on the wealth. You could actually invite other people into the district. But one way or another, it is really difficult to understand how you can have a $40 million budget and have the overhead that we have to graduate about 100 kids. So I personally am not stuck in the past on any issue. We need to be able to explore possibilities here that don't necessarily just include us having an argument every year about, no, you pay more, no, I pay more, because that's not durable. I can tell you right now that Chatham has got an elementary school that has one classroom per grade, and it has about 18 kids in it, in each grade. So if you look at that, today's third grader is tomorrow's 10th grader. So that disparity is going to continue to grow up in the system unless we do something to look at that formula. Education matters, and the way we handle education is going to matter even more.
Thank you, Don. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Charles. And I will say that I learned the other day that about 50% of every dollar we spend in taxes goes to our school budget. That's a lot of money. Monomoy school system is a fantastic system. I'm going to choose my words carefully here because I support our school system 100%, but I also don't think the current setup between Harwich and Chatham is sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable for our town. And this brings me back to housing, because if we don't have housing for young people, this school system might not be sustainable for either town down the road. And I want to take a good look at that. It's really hard for me to truly speak intelligently on the nuances of our school budget and how our school systems are being run, because I'm not in those meetings yet, hopefully. But it would be one of the top of my list agendas to make sure that I truly understand that agreement better, what our school system needs, how the residents of Harwich can see a future on how we're going to sustain this agreement, or get back to the table with Chatham. And as Don said, I wouldn't call it an argument. I would hopefully think of it as constructive criticism and collaboration, and just get a general understanding of what each town needs. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the buildings need to be opened. So each town might want to take the cost of just opening the buildings on themselves, and then divvy up the money per student. There has to be more questions asked. There has to be more new ideas given. There has to be the ability to sit at a table and not have positional bargaining where it's a zero-sum game. And I think that is exactly what it's been for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 3. Who has 3? And the order of response on this will be Don, Jeff, and Pete.
Yes, Michael Rutten, East Harwich. Thank you all for running. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
My question for each of you, should you be elected, what will you do to make sure that the conversations that we have in public meetings, especially when it involves volunteers, is done in a completely respectful manner? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Don, Jeff, and then Pete for that.
It would come to me first. I sit at some of the meetings that we're at being mortified. I have a kind of joke that I make of this, but there's a nugget of truth in it. If I want to get yelled at, I can stay home and have that happen. But in that comment is the truth. It almost is like we're getting a lottery where who's the person who's going to come into this meeting who's going to get abused before the meeting is over. You can't operate like that. We're losing staff in an amazing way. I mean, I walk down the hallway, town hall, they don't know who I am and I don't know who they are. There's that much turnover. I read a list in January of 24 people, and they didn't all retire, that I thanked for their prior service. It's permeating everywhere, this lack of respect. We operate, and I think it's been said by both of my colleagues up here, that we operate on volunteers. And if we can't do better than we're doing right now, we're doomed, because most of what we do, the planning board, the regulatory bodies, the conservation commission, all of them are premised on a robust volunteer force populating them. And I have a history. I'll point anybody who I think is serious and brings some dialogue to the table. I don't have to agree with everybody, and I don't think it's wise to appoint people that you only agree with, which gets me back to the matter of respect. If you don't agree with somebody who's in front of you at a selectmen's meeting, let them have their time to speak, and let them sit down and thank them for their participation. You don't have to agree with everything that everybody says, but good conclusions only come by discussion from different viewpoints.
Thank you,
Thank you for asking the question. I think that's on everybody's minds since some recent things have presented themselves. So I have a few thoughts on this. I've been in the people business for 33 years, and I'm still in business. So I believe that the way I handle the people that I deal with and the people I interact with is with the utmost of respect and the ability to listen and learn. Seek to learn first. Seek to understand first. But there are going to be disagreements. And if I'm elected, I'm not going to be in lockstep with every single person here, but I can promise you that I will listen and I will be respectful. What scares me, though, is that when you see public displays of anger, frustration, so forth and so on, what's happening in the closed-door meetings? It's only an extension of what's going on behind those closed doors. And when, again, choosing words carefully here, when the public sees what the public saw several weeks ago, the public will lose confidence in the people they've elected. And that is not okay. That is exactly diametrically opposed to how it's supposed to be. So respectful discussion, civil disagreements. I love to have disagreements. It's the only way things can change and move forward. I think, Patrick, you came to an event we had a little while ago, and we did not see eye to eye, but I walked out of there, and I actually thanked you on Facebook. I don't think you saw it, but I had such a great conversation with Patrick, and I understood his point. And I think he also heard mine. So, respectful dialogue, cooperation, it is the pinnacle, it's the beacon of which all elected boards should follow. Thank you.
Pete.
No clapping? I mean, Don got clapping.
You got the stop.
Oh, yeah, oh, it's stop sign, thank you.
I was raised, my wife and I have raised our children to be respectful of others and to stand up for others. So if I'm in attendance at a meeting and somebody's being disrespected, I'll make a correction. I'll make a correction of the chair or any other individual in the room that's disrespecting that person. As a couple of the other folks already mentioned, disagreement is a healthy thing. Debate is an incredible thing. But doing it with respect, not taking it personally, not being offended, is extremely important if you want to serve in public office, if you want to be a town leader, if you want to be a department head. And I would suggest that anybody that doesn't show up to work or to a meeting with that thought process in hand should go home. And a simple answer is, I would interrupt the individual that's being disrespectful and ask them to show respect.
Thank you. I think that the stop sign we have might be a good thing to take to selectmen's meetings. Who has question number 4? Who's lucky number 4? Somebody must be. 4? Okay, we'll move on to number 5. Here we go.
Whose question is this? Is this Peter's?
You.
Is me?
I'll give it to you here. It's going to be, it's Jeff, this round is Jeff,
Thank you.
Pete, and Don. We're just kind of going like this.
Good morning, everyone. This is very similar to question number 3. I'm going to repeat it because it shows us how we as citizens are feeling about this important topic. And it brought to my mind, because yesterday I ran into a lady from the Chase Library, and she mentioned to me that the beloved childhood book called Good Night Moon, perhaps some of you are familiar with it, is now on the banned book list. Goodbye, Good Night Moon. But that started me thinking, if all politics is local, how can you, as a selectman person, help us safeguard our freedoms? And in particular, I was thinking about when we come before you in public comments, that can be pretty scary for citizens, and we would like to know that we would allow our respectful freedom of thought without fear of being silenced, angrily reprimanded, or even thrown out, which almost happened to me one time. So that's an important question to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, Jeff, you're up first.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I am still reading Goodnight Moon as it I love the book. I'm going to answer, I think, your second part. I'm going to answer the second part of your question first. The culture I would want to see and want to be a part of, would like to create, would be a culture of inspiring the townspeople to be able to stand up at town meeting, be able to stand up at a selectmen's meeting, be able to enter into town hall and feel like they're going to be heard, listened to, and supported. I'm not sure we're there at the moment, but I think that is a really good goal for us to aim for. And I believe I'm one of those people who would, on a consistent basis, without exception, bring that kind of culture to every interaction that I would have. I'll answer the first part now quickly. If Goodnight Moon rose to the level of the select board, I would vote to keep Goodnight Moon in place. I would also make sure that I'd want to hear what the other people on the board have to say, because if it's important to somebody, it's the job of the select board to listen to why it's important, regardless of how they feel about the agended item. But the culture needs to be improved on. I think we'll get more people on committees if they feel, the vacancy in our committees is unbelievable, and that's how our town moves. That's the gears. That's how it moves on a day-to-day basis. So I think we'd see more people coming out to be part of a committee if we could inspire the participation. Thank you.
Pete?
In general, I'm not a fan of banning anything. I'm not a fan of cancel culture or reducing people's rights. I'm a general sense. I wish I could tell you I remember the book Goodnight Moon. I guess at this point I'm glad that I don't. But in any event, I wouldn't be an individual that supported banning the book. And I believe in, again, parental rights and their choices that they're afforded to them. Once again, when it comes to folks attending meetings, whether it's a townsperson that just wants to speak to the board or the committee, they absolutely need to be treated with respect. And I won't spend a long time repeating myself, but if I'm sitting on the committee and that person's being disrespected, I'm going to hold the individual disrespecting them accountable. And more importantly, if the individual's granted 2, 3, 4 minutes of speaking time, they're going to be allowed to use that 2, 3, 4 minutes of time. There were many of people who came before us when I last sat on the board that I didn't necessarily agree with. But I showed them respect and I listened to what they had to say, as well as others. And you make your decision based on the facts, your own thought processes, and what you feel is in the best interest of town. But again, the short answer, it all comes down to respecting individuals and holding folks accountable.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I am a little worried, Sally, because if that book gets banned, then what's going to happen next with Good Morning Sunshine, which I also have at home. The more overview answer to your question is, we're having a tough time in this country in general, where people are equating equality in discussion with getting over on somebody. Everybody can't have the same opinion about everything, and we need to be able to respect that unless it's causing some sort of harm to somebody. Now I'm going to go sideways here and talk for a couple seconds about what Jeff said about being 700 days since we bought the Marsline property. I want to point out that we were between town administrators then, when that property was bought. It took the four of us less than 6 months to buy the commercial property, get all of the engineering done, get all of the surveying done, get the financing arranged and everything. And from that point on, we changed back to the town administrator being the chair. There has been a Groundhog's Day of agendas that are the exact same agenda. What is a trust? What can a trust do? In the meantime, we've just squandered 2 years. 2 years. And I think it's bound up in the lack of respect. I mean, Judith was at a meeting where she was just tortured and vilified. And how do you get anything done when you don't respect the people around you? We bought that property. Everybody had a function. They were all different functions, but we worked together as a team. That got blown out. It can't happen. If you start getting to the point of everything's being reductionist, then you've got a problem that isn't going to be solved.
Thank you.
Raise your hand if you have the next number.
Well, before we get to that, I just want to make one observation, and that is on this topic, by the way. Having been in an office on and off for 15 years, I can just say I was stunned last year, I believe, when I went to go in the selectman's office, and I don't know if anybody's been there lately. There is a massive oak barricade when you walk in the door that defies the reasoning of it. It used to be you could walk in, see the town administrator, see selectmen if they were there, see the assistant town administrator, talk to the clerks. There is this massive thing in there, and I hope that whoever wins, one of the first things they do is get a vote of the board to get rid of that thing, because that just says we're not open and we're not transparent, so. And you can burn it down, but anyway. If it happens, don't blame me. All right, question number 6. Who's got number 6?
Mark Keller, West Harwich. Just shout. I've got a.
All right, you can yell. You're good.
Thank you, candidates, for taking a stand. What a beautiful building. I've never been here before. I'm going to speak about town meeting. I was a little bit disappointed with the tenor of the town meeting. I had a feeling at some portions it was us against them. I heard words like, if you question a certain building, the word hate. I heard another comment that I'm ready to fight. You know, I think we're better than that. I think, as Peter said, and you all say, we have some big fiscal challenges coming up in the future, so we need to get ourselves together. I was especially affected by the comments of one person from the floor. Kind of reflected my thing, is that, you know, a town meeting is supposed to be democratic. Last year we voted on something. We were sure that it would be performed. And especially, it should have been performed because it's an emotional item. We're fighting over what? A building? But it wasn't carried out, specifically per that article. I was especially affected by the fact that this particular person, who has done a lot for this town, saving millions of dollars for this town, said, based upon what happened this past year, there's no need for him to go to town meeting anymore. He'll watch it on TV, because what was decided at that meeting wasn't acted upon. So here's my question. If you were a selectman this past year, how would you have handled, I'm going to say specifically, Article 57, how would you have handled that? To maybe perhaps decrease the rancor that has happened in our community. And going forward, how would you address things like that? Where a town meeting, there's a certain sentiment, will you follow it or not? Because we've got probably 3 or 4 or 5 years to get our fiscal house in order. Then we won't be able to talk about anything but wastewater. Thank you.
Okay, so the response to this is Pete, Don, and Jeff. But just let me clarify, I think, where you're going with this. You were talking about not this town meeting, but the town meeting before, where there was a petition article that was submitted having to do with the old middle school. That's the topic, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then fast forward to this year, there was concern that what was decided the previous year wasn't carried out. That's the topic we're dealing with here, okay?
And that it was wrong.
What?
The business plan was not done. There was
Yeah,
no-
right, no, that's the topic,
That's the
okay?
topic.
That's the topic, so Pete?
Would I have followed through on the business plan that was voted last town meeting? Yes. What I can share with you again is, during my last time in office, there were many things approved at town meeting that I didn't necessarily agree with, but we went forward with them. I don't believe there's any harm in conducting a business plan in which the townspeople at town meeting requested and funded. I don't have the inside knowledge as to why it wasn't done, or why they felt there wasn't a need. But at a minimum, there should have been a message delivered back to the townspeople as to why, prior to town meeting, that could have potentially minimized the tone and tenor that occurred during this past town meeting a couple nights ago, and encouraged people to participate without feeling as if they're going to be victimized. The simple answer is, I believe the 204 Sisson, the old school, whatever people want to call it. I'll go on the record of saying I'm not a fan of 204 Sisson, but I think there needs to be studies conducted of the building. At a minimum, I want a comprehensive engineering study of the entire facility. I don't like throwing $2 million at a building that may need $15, $20 million worth of work if it's not the right work being done initially. But to circle it all back to the tone and tenor, the behavior at town meeting, again, I think people need to stop taking things personally and realize we're conducting the business of the town during that session. But I will say, I give Mike Ford a ton of credit for handling the folks in town the way he does, so thank you.
Done.
That's it. Time's
That's
up.
It's like the Oscars.
Don will now sing a song.
I hope not.
Oh, Lord.
Let me start out by saying that I would pit my own background in culture and the arts against anybody. So I was the president of the Junior Theater in the 90s. I helped Judy get off the ground with the licensing agreement for this. I was friends with Milton Welt. I was friends with Georgia Dearborn. I was friends with Vivian Oswell. So I go way back in culture here. So I don't want anybody to infer, because that happened at town meeting, about hate. I don't want anybody to infer that questioning funds questions the actual activity. I agree with Pete. Ultimately, I had an expectation that there would be, if not the contractor doing the kind of review of the building that Mark was talking about, that there'd be some professional review inside the town. Now, I've kept lines of communication open with the finance committee, but you're right, there's, on our board, there is a mentality of I win, you lose. And we gotta stop that. It is kind of foolhardy to, first of all, the meeting that was held with the town administrator, instead of having a meeting with stakeholders that was, what are your desires? What are your dreams? What doesn't work? Instead it was, so you rent here. Okay, we're gonna come up with a process for you to continue to rent. That's not a study. And as far as I'm concerned, we're doing an auditorium right now for about $500,000, and we're not even beginning to address whether there should be air conditioning in the building. So at a time when most tourists are going to be here and populating that area, it's going to be about 95 or 100 degrees in there. It makes no sense. There should have been some comprehensive plan so that all the pieces of this building fit together nicely. The people who are there aren't at fault about anything. They're terrific folks, and we have, second possibly only to Provincetown, the best cultural facility anywhere. So I've been told to stop.
There you go. All right, Jeff, you're right.
Thank you.
I need to make a quick comment for a history lesson here, folks. Those of you who have been around a while remember all the controversy when the Council on Aging was moved from the Arbor House to the Community Center. A lot of folks did not like that idea. And when I was chair of the Board of the Council on Aging, and even after the folks moved there, a good number still wanted a separate facility. So asking questions about 204 in the Cultural Center is legitimate. It's happened before. That doesn't mean we don't like it. That doesn't mean we care about it. But if it happened in 2000 with the Council on Aging, what's wrong with asking the questions now? Thank you.
All right, Chris just put up the stop sign. Sorry for the interruption.
Sure.
Jeff.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Ray, for your comment.
Fantastic question. A lot to unpack in 2 minutes. I'll try to do it quickly. I am 100% in support of that cultural center and what goes on in there. I think the people who are in that cultural center are doing exactly what should be going on in there. Cara is an all-star, and I support everything that she's doing to try and figure out what this building will be when it grows up. I am here, I would be here sitting as a selectman to represent the wishes of the town. If the town wishes to have a funding study or a feasibility study or a study for planning, I would 100% make sure that that happened, without question. So that'll answer that question. I think, Mark, a lot of people stand up, and as they're going to the mic, they have a feeling of what they're going to be hit with. So there's a little bit of angst already for people to stand up and talk at town meeting, and I don't think that's productive. I would also ask, as I do with every My wife says it best. You'll learn everything you need to know in kindergarten. Don't hit, don't bite, play well with others, right? So that's the way I would approach this. I would ask, is what is being asked reasonable? And if it is reasonable, then I would absolutely fight to make sure that what is being asked happens. If I don't think it's reasonable, I'm going to go and ask for more information to find out exactly why certain people, and I can respect their positions 100%, why they would want to know what the plan is for that building. Why they want, what is that $1.9 million going to be spent on? And does it make sense to spend it right now? So I hope I answered your questions, Mark. There was a lot to unpack there, but I'll also say that if we're spending a lot of time as a town discussing behavior and the way we interact with each other, we're really not spending the time on the issues and the things that need to be handled. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add that my observation on the finance committee, one of the biggest frustrations is not the cultural aspect of the building, because I agree. It's a very necessary thing and a vibrant thing. It's this thing called municipal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me that the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator, can't define what they want to do with that municipal part of the building?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to move town hall down there?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We're adding people. We're going to have to put them somewhere, right? Come clean, tell us what the plan is. That's all we're asking for. All right, so moving on. Who's your lucky number 7? Oh, it's a wastewater commission. Lorraine's getting to you. Hang on. Hang on. Yeah.
Mary Dawn Headwaters. Dawn alluded to the fact that in the past few years we've had a staggering amount of retirements and resignations. This situation causes a tremendous amount of work by the people in administration, which means they can't go forward with all of the other 30 things we're trying to get done. One of the unseen things that happens is that since we have a cooperative town, or cooperative staff anyway, all the department heads and the employees, they work with each other. All of a sudden there's a hole in the staffing structure. They can't go ahead either. So I really feel that many issues have been in a state of stagnation because of this for the past couple of years. You're in the middle of something, first somebody resigns, they're not there, then there's the 3 to 6 to 9 months to get them on board, and then they're overwhelmed with problem number 1, never mind your problem. So what I want to ask you is, I don't feel this problem, I feel it's so huge it can no longer be solved by hiring one job at a time. It's just going on and on and on. I really think that the board should consider consulting the Mass Management Association or some other group to get some professional guidance to find out what's going on with our work environment to cause this continuing situation, because it's costing us money and it's costing us productivity, and it's probably hurting our communication, which doesn't help all the other things we've talked about. So could you three, and thank you all for running so we can have people to ask these questions, what specific things would you folks do if you're elected to get to the root of this problem, not just fill the latest empty seat?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So the order of answers here will be Don, Jeff, and then Pete.
Sorry,
Well, Noreen, I have to admit that of all the people sitting in this room, I've been responsible for the removal of 2 town administrators in the past. Things happen that are a reflection of both the board and administration. And they're different skill sets. Being really smart is not the same as being a really good collaborative leader. I think that one of the things we need to address is how we approach leadership in town hall. Because that's where I think a lot of the problems are existing. I spoke with our former finance director at the Massachusetts Municipal Association this past year. She is extraordinarily happy working in the county. There's something wrong with that. that people are happier once they have left. You can't come out with conclusions that are good if you're just silently accepting poor behavior. And personally, I would like to see some sort of performance improvement plan be put into place in management so that we wind up not having kind of this oligarchic, I tell you, you do it or else, but we have more collaborative management going on because we're too small a town to be operating as if this was a CEO of some major corporation, and it's infecting everything that we do. And by the way, just a quick aside, Pete's right. Pete served with me. Pete and I disagreed about 40–50% of the time. I went home from every meeting respecting him even more each time because it's how you handle situations that matter. It's not the situation itself often because those topics change. But the people who are dealing with them don't. And if we don't start fundamentally addressing that, we're going to be in serious trouble because we've had an outflow of talent, both paid employees and volunteers, that's not acceptable.
Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I would be in favor of exploring an HR, an outside consultant, somebody to do a real drill down and get a good appraisal of how the inner workings of our town hall is actually working. I think we also have to ask the question of why people are leaving. Attrition is part of any business. There's a time to celebrate, which would be retirement, or somebody moving on to a stronger position for their family. I would support that. And I've owned a business for 33 years, and whenever anybody would leave because they found a better opportunity, there was a party thrown. But retention, as you so well put it, is so key to the continuity of how the day-to-day operation of our town is going to work. So a simple exit interview, I don't know who would give it because I'm not part of that town government yet, but an exit interview would provide the critical information and go in a file so that the town could learn and gain knowledge to figure out exactly where they're falling short. Leadership is a word that I think gets thrown around too casually. Leadership is only good when there's people who want to follow you because they like your vision, your mission, and what you stand for. You don't get to slap a name tag on that says leader and then tell everybody to follow you. That isn't how it works. And I've never followed anybody who compelled me to follow them by way of force. So I think we need to start with an exit strategy, an exit interview. I think we need to look at HR. I think we need to drill down, maybe a consultant. I'd be in favor of all of those things. Needs to change. Thank you.
Got your clap. Nice.
Yeah, I got my clap.
And you didn't have to ask.
Finally, it's an hour.
I don't want this chewing up my time, and not for you too.
Sorry, sir.
No. Staffing is a complex issue today, right? It's a different workforce than it used to be. And so I think the town does need a specialist when it comes to employee and employee management. So if there's a firm out there that can come in and evaluate our practices and provide us with some industry standards, some best guidelines to follow, then I'm all for it. Truly, I don't know. I'm not an insider. I don't know the whys of what's going on, why people are leaving, whether they're retiring early or choosing to work elsewhere. Like most of you, I can speculate. I can make my assumptions. Clearly, some of you have more insight than I do, and that's a good thing. But what I can share is if the issue has to do with workload or salary and wages, I'm happy to work with town leadership to see what can be done to help improve those things, if there's something that can be done. But if the issue has to do with leadership and a lack of respect, once again, I'm happy to hold those folks accountable. People are going to be treated with respect and fairness, whether they come to the town as a volunteer or work for the town as an employee. And that's incumbent upon the selectmen, again, to hold those in charge accountable. But absolutely, in today's day and age, a specialist with employee relations is needed. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to question 9.
What happened to 8?
Oh, I'm sorry. Who has
I wonder who has 8. Yeah, I wonder who has 8.
I'm still waiting for 4. I'm waiting for number 4.
And by the way, the order is going to be Jeff, Pete, and Don. So,
Good morning. Good morning, yes. I appreciate all three of you being here to listen to We the People. I've been to 2 nights of town meeting. I think it's a great form of local government that a lot of places don't have today, that people can get up and speak and be heard and be respected for the most part. And then we get to vote. So speaking of voting, I would like each of you to tell us about your voting record, local, state, and federal, and town meeting attendance. Thank you. Did I take away once? Elaine Dickinson. Still fresh out.
your husband knows who you are. He'll vouch for you.
Thank you, Elaine. It's me, right, Peter?
Yeah, Jeff.
Thank you for the question. This came up my first run, and I can't hide from it, can't run from it. I can only be honest about it, because that's all I have. Through my younger years of being in Harwich, I did not have a voting record. And I could tell you why, but I'm not sure that's even gonna matter. But when I decided to run the first time, one of the big reasons for me to throw my hat in the ring was because I hadn't been part of the system. And for me, that was unacceptable. For my family, that was unacceptable. One of the things I ran on the first time was to try, if I did become a select person, I'm not sure where we are with that yet, but I'll say selectman, would be to inspire people like myself who didn't feel comfortable or didn't feel ready or knowledgeable or informed to get out and cast a vote, to try to be part of the government, part of the community in a bigger way. So I can say only for the last maybe 3 or 4 elections and town meetings, and now that I'm part of the local comprehensive planning committee, I've been 2 feet in, I voted, I've gone to town meeting. I'd like to see them shortened a little bit, but I can tell you that I am 100% committed to the process of how our town runs. Thank you.
Got involved in local politics at a young age, and I would say that my track record for voting at the local, state, and federal level is pretty strong. I'm not going to say it's 100%. I don't know what the number is, to be quite honest with you, but I vote practically every election that comes forward. Attendance at town meeting, I can share with you that since leaving the board, it has not been good. And there's a variety of reasons. Again, some folks would consider valid, others would not. But competing priorities and understanding that I'm typically a minority at that town meeting. So when you have competing priorities, you choose what you think best serves your time. And so my attendance at town meeting has not been tremendous over the past few years, but my voting record I would put up against pretty much anyone.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry.
It's okay. Well, having been born in the city of Yonkers, New York, where our slogan was, "Who let that happen?" I consider it a blessing to live in a place that has town meeting, and a blessing to live in a country that has people being allowed to vote and weigh in on things. I know that I missed 2 town meetings over the last 32 years for illness. I believe that there are several times that people offered me money to not come to town meeting. But nonetheless,
let's not talk about my years on the board.
Yeah, nonetheless, I showed up. And I think when you're counting primaries, state elections, federal elections, and local elections, I may have missed 1 or 2 over the 32 years, but I consider it to be something that's an honor to do, so I do it. And I think it's terrific. We live in a town that pretty much emulates the Mayflower Compact. It is democracy. You don't have a representative there to tell you what to do. You are your own representative.
Thanks. So starting to run up against the clock, you would agree, Ray, I think, we're getting close. I think we have time for one.
If you can get through them all, the line people's, I don't want to cut off the last few people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody happy with staying for a while?
How many more questions the timer asks?
Great question.
I brought my blanket with me, so it's okay.
I've got 19.
Yeah, hang on a second.
Yep.
Hang on a second. I do want to make sure when we wrap it up that we give the candidates at least a minute apiece. to give us their closing,
Yep, good.
get to the polls and vote thing. So, what I would suggest is let's try and run through the questions succinctly. If we can kind of shorten our answers a little bit, just in the interest of time, that way we can service everybody who's here, at least hear their questions. So we'll go to number 9. Who's got number 9? Ted Williams.
George Shower?
And you order here would be Pete, Don, and Jeff. So we're going Pete, Don, and Jeff.
Thank you.
on this one.
Yeah, thank you everybody for being here, Patrick Hawkins, Harwich. My question is, why do you live here? And I'm gonna ask that question within the context of what happened in town meeting. $50 million for sewering, $5.5 million for extending sewering along West Harwich. Already we spent $21 million in sewering. Obviously, sewering is the most expensive item on our budget, and the town of Harwich is in favor of it. Those all passed. We have another, how many? 300 million to go. Sewering is absolutely important. We also approved $50,000 for the Chamber of Commerce to promote Harwich. Why? Because we have polluted waters, because 80% of our embayments are polluted, 30% of our ponds are polluted. We've also approved $92,000 to clean up Skinnicut Pond. Why? Because they're polluted, because of our behavior. So why do you live here? Environmental causes and problems are the #1 reason why we need to be of concern. It's the #1 reason why we're spending so much money. I want to know why you live here. Is it for development or is it for environment? These are critical decisions, and leadership on this issue is absolutely essential. Listen to what the town of Harwich is saying. Listen to why we're devoted to spending that much money to solve our pollution problems. Thank you.
Okay, Pete, you're up first.
Well, I guess I don't live in Harwich for environmental reasons nor developmental reasons. I live in Harwich because 20-odd years ago, my in-laws lived in Harwich, and we used to visit. And I found it to be a great community. It had good schools. It had great golf courses, beautiful beaches, tremendous ponds. And it was an atmosphere that my wife and I appreciated. So we made the decision to move to Harwich when we could afford to, because we saw the writing on the wall, and we knew that in future years, we may not be able to buy into the housing market. So we took the opportunity, we sold our home, and we moved here to Harwich. Environmental issues clearly need to be on everybody's mind. Development needs to be on people's mind. But to answer your true question, neither one of those are the reason I live here.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer that you can walk and chew gum at the same time, Patrick. I said in the opening statement, and I mean it, I've spent the better part of my life working against what seemingly are competing interests, the environment, education, housing, and culture and history. They're all important. So why do I live here? Because we do all those things. This is a remarkable community. You can't develop your way out of a problem. You're not going to sewer your way out of problems either. It might be surprising for a lot of you people to know this, but I'm like board for HESH, which is a housing-related organization. Several members are also board members of the Conservation Trust. You got to be able to do all these things. If you don't overdevelop, you're not going to have to oversewer. So figuring out how to do stuff, repurposing existing housing is also a priority. And I got to say, why do I live here? It's to try to help the community to have all of that. I didn't come here because it had a whole bunch of houses, I can tell you that. But unless you pay attention to that fragile balance of everything that's going on, we could lose what makes Harwich remarkable. So again, there isn't just one issue. You got to be able to do all of these things at once. And I do value the environment, but I also value housing. And you got to find places where one exists, and it should be there, and how to protect overdevelopment in other places, like the DCPC and the Six Ponds District.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, if I was from Yonkers, I'd have moved here too.
There you go. Our major export was concrete.
This, for me, Patrick, is the best question yet so far. Why do I live here? I live here because of the people. I'm the only one who can say I grew up here. I'm part of the fabric of this town. My family grew up here. My grandfather grew up here. The community, the people, knowing everybody, being able to walk into a store and say hi to absolutely everybody, and then they ask you how your grandmother is, your grandfather is, and your cousin, and what. That's why I live here. I didn't have a choice to come here. I was born here. Right? I didn't choose to move here. I chose to stay here. I had a job that allowed me to travel around the country. I told this to someone last night. I was all around the country, and everywhere I went, people would say, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, "Harwich, Massachusetts, Cape Cod." And they'd stop in their tracks, and they'd say, "Wait a minute, really? You're really from Cape Cod?" I'd say, "Yeah, I'm really from Cape Cod." This is a magical place to the entire country. We live in a desirable location. And to your point, absolutely the environment is of the utmost importance. Look at what our family did with the Handler's Auto Parts property. A brownfield. And my father-in-law and my mother-in-law are here right now. And they were the driving force, and I just got to be a part of it. So the environment is hugely important to me and my family and I. But we also have to develop, and as I said earlier, we have to embrace our past but plan for our future. And our future needs families with young children, people who can work here and survive here. But there is a balance, Patrick, and I believe with the right people that balance can be struck. Thank you.
Question number 10. Who's got 10?
My husband has it, but could I speak for him?
Is he gonna lie? Can you just have him confirm it's okay for you to speak for him?
We will allow it.
We'll take it.
It's Elaine Dickinson again.
Hi, Elaine.
On behalf of,
Arthur Dickinson.
There you go.
Thank you.
Let's see, environment. I like what you said, okay?
Thank you.
Don and Jeff. Pete, I don't feel like I think it's that important here. But in the world that we live in today, with global warming, climate change, everything going through, it really is. I talk to my daughters, okay, and their friends, and they're young people, and they just look at us old people and say, "What have you done to the earth? Polluted it, and just ruined it." And the one daughter she works like 24/7. Not only her own job, but environmental things in the town in which she lives, Plymouth, where they have the nuclear power plant, which wants to dump the water that they're decommissioning into our bay. Could you speak about that?
the question.
Speak about that.
Please don't interrupt her.
I just asked it. What do you feel about the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant dumping their waste into our Cape Cod Bay?
All right, thank you. So the order of this one, Don first, Jeff, and then Pete.
I know at the board level, we had a kind of a ridiculous dive into what percentage of dilution the radioactive water would have if it got released in the Cape Cod Bay. I'm kind of a purist on this stuff. If you're not willing to drink it, then don't put it in anybody's water. We have grown up in a period of time, and if those of you of an age remember that on Sunday mornings at Meet the Press, there used to be Dow Chemical ads, and their slogan was, "Without chemicals, life itself would not be possible." And we have a tremendous amount of background chemicals, a tremendous amount of things that are interacting in our everyday existence that weren't there 50 or 60 years ago. We have to be really careful about what we do. I have more of an optimistic take on this because when I was growing up, and some of you may have experienced this yourself, Dad would change the oil to the car and then go seek out the storm drain in the road and just pour it in. We don't do that anymore. We recognize that that's dumb and that we need to be able to get along with the environment better. I have an optimism that the more people are informed about stuff that's going on, the more they will be better tutors of their environment. I have to say that I'm really disappointed with the folks who are currently decommissioning Pilgrim because they knew going in that it wasn't just a nursery home that they were getting involved with. It had radioactive fissionable material. And for them to be surprised that we weren't going to be really happy about them just opening up a spigot and dumping it somewhere, I wonder where they got their management experience.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll help the process out here by being quick. As Don said, the company knew what they were getting into. It's their job to figure it out, not at our expense. I'm 100% against what you just asked. 100% against it. Thank you.
Pete?
Agreed. There's no level of contamination that should be dumped into the bay or to any waterway, to be quite honest with you. I would disagree that I don't care about the environment. I will say that I'm not an alarmist, and I'm not saying that some of the proposals or issues brought forward at town meeting or discussed today aren't true issues. But I'm someone who tries to come at things with a level head, with an approach of collaboration and teamwork and education. And if we want to talk about balloons and plastics and fertilizer, as I said, I'm not a person who's a proponent of just banning these things. I'd rather educate. I'd rather look at the true issues that are facing the town. And I think some folks brought up some valid points at town meeting. Plastic containers at takeout restaurants are important, but it's not our main contributor by any long stretch. So every bit helps, and so I'm not opposed to the communication and to the education that goes along with it, but I just don't consider myself an alarmist that believes in straight up bans, that's all. And so the environment's important to all of us. Development is important to all of us. But I believe the question that I was asked previously was about if that's my driver for living here, and neither one was, so.
Okay, thank you. Looks like question number 11. In the order here would be Jeff, Pete, and Don. I'd ask you if you can keep your response to maybe a minute, we can get through these things.
Absolutely.
Okay. I know some people are getting kind of anxious to get going.
Let's make it a yes or no, Ed.
I've job I've been a selectman had been a selectman for some time in the town. One of the things that I always did was participate with the Cape Cod Selectmen's, Cape and Island Selectmen's Association, and unfortunately involved with that for the benefits that acting regionally can bring resources to our region to solve our local individual town problems. Cases like one of the issues was the transit, the occupancy tax for bed and breakfast. We were the prime movers in the state to do that, and it's something that's benefiting us with an enhanced revenue stream, both for general operations and for our sewage problems. I just want to know what you're feeling about participating with those sorts of organizations to enhance the Cape Cod and all of our individual towns' ability to attract state and federal funding.
Okay, thank you.
Will you participate?
I will participate 100%. Thank you.
Yes, Ed, I had the opportunity to serve with you, and during those years, for work purposes, I was pretty limited on my availability. Thankfully, with some changes that have occurred at work, participation such as that is encouraged, and so therefore it would be something that I look to participate on and help bring that regional approach to items that, quite frankly, deserve it. Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
One of these times I
As you know, Ed, I was once president of the Selectmen and Councilors Association, and I participated quite robustly at that point in time. I was also served on the Board of Directors of the Mass Municipal Association. Remarkably, a lot of these issues don't change, and what I've found recently is there's an awful lot of activity surrounding the Board of Selectmen that didn't exist 20 years ago. I mean, I'm not really willing to make a commitment that I'm going to be in attendance at every at one of the meetings, because I touch base with most of the major participants in that in the daily routine on the wastewater board, at the county. I mean, I'm on a first name basis with a lot of those folks. I don't know that you have to be able to travel to Falmouth to sit down with about 15 people in a room. To be able, to do that every month, to even come up with a conclusion. At a certain point in time, it's about being here and showing up, rather than going out to meetings. So I may be the only person here who's not going to be willing to commit to coming to every one of those meetings.
Okay, thank you, Don. Who's got number 12?
So your name out loud, one, two.
And the rotation here will be Pete, Don, and then Jim. So it'll be going right.
So this is a reiteration of the environmental concerns. As has been mentioned, the global crisis of climate change and sixth mass extinction, there is an impending necessity to take it sort of a further step.
Just speak into the mic a
Sort
little
of
bit.
a further step than what are we locally attending to, but there is the need to actually consider how do we follow a pathway in which we reduce human consumption, reduce human commercial and residential development, and not so much things like affordable housing, but things like McMansions and of various different sizes. What do we do as a town that's willing to look at that problem and be active in shifting those center values into one that are sustainable in the coming years?
Pete, you're first.
Yeah, and I wish I had an answer I could give you in 2 minutes that made sense, but I don't. When you talk about buildings and McMansions and whatnot, those come down to zoning regulations, right? And what the town wants and what the bodies that serve in those capacities lay out as a plan. So it's a difficult thing to control when the horse is already out of the barn, but it's certainly something you can put in for future development and try to put in some restraints to retain the character of certain areas within town. Again, when you want to talk about some of the global issues, I'm certainly not the person who can sit up here and articulate what needs to be done to accomplish these things, and I'm not even going to try to pretend that I can. So, thank you.
I am very concerned about what you're saying. At our level, we're somewhat limited about what we can do, but I can tell you that I can direct you to the town's website, and you can look at the comprehensive plan that I had the privilege of being a primary author of in 1999. And there's whole sections of it that talk about protecting the environment and not allowing development, because I have a unique perspective from how I grew up. And I got to tell you that when I moved here, concern number one for me was the prospect that we would make the same dumb mistakes that Long Island made. And it appears that we're doing exactly that. So Pete's right, zoning dictates certain things. I mean, even the ADUs, I'm not sure, the people that have the money don't want anybody on their property outside of the 3 months that they live there, and then they lock it down with some help to keep it private. The people that need the ADUs are going to be hard put to be able to finance that. And I think, as I said before, just throwing up a bunch of buildings isn't going to be the solution, because then you start injuring other things that you need to worry about. There has to be solution. And I got to say, one thing that nobody's talking about here is we only wind up contributing 1/5 to the discussion. You have to have the ability to convince people on the board, because the board acts as a board. It doesn't act as a bunch of people. And I think one of the strengths that I've had through the years is that I'm not at all afraid pitching an alternative viewpoint. I've had my share of 4-to-1 votes. And I'm going to keep plugging if you folks are willing to keep sending me back.
Yeah.
Sure. And thank you for the question. As Don mentioned, the local comprehensive plan from 99. Our current local comprehensive plan is expired. And as vice chair of the local planning committee to develop the next local comprehensive plan, I can assure you that all 11 of us have prioritized the environmental impacts of absolutely everything that happens in the 4 boundaries of our town as one of our top priorities. So, the balance between personal property rights and education to bring more people into the lens that they look through of being more environmentally friendly. People are going to have to get to those places on their own time. It's not something that we can beat over someone's head. But I can assure you, all 11 of us on that committee are 100% committed to our next local comprehensive plan having a tremendous amount of language regarding our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who has lucky number 13?
Yeah.
I have 13.
Mr. Brayman, you get him a mic.
Roger Brayman, school director. My first observation at this meeting and also the town meeting, nobody seems to observe the time limits. It goes on and on and on. And I've been to many town meetings, perhaps more than anybody in here, in another town. And it just seems that it never ends with the conversation about something. And obviously people don't recognize when an article is going a certain way, but they just keep on talking and talking and talking. And here today, for the most part, that little white flag went up every time you turned around. Now, my question to the selectmen is, select group, is that taxes are probably the driving force for housing, sewerage, you go on and on, environment, and so on. There's an awful lot of things that you have no control over, just like the federal budget. But what specifically would you work on to reduce or put the brakes on spending that's within the powers of the select group? Thank you.
Okay, and so this rotation goes Don, Jeff, and Pete.
It started out as a trick question, though. It's a debate, and he doesn't want me to speak. Short. Well, the short answer is a lot of it's baked into the cake. It has to do with the expectations of the citizenry. We're not going to just stop doing certain things. We're not going to not have a building department, not have a school. What you really need to do is dive down into how they operate and try to squeeze as much out of it with efficiencies as possible. I know 20 years ago, my dream was you turn on a computer in your PJs, you can pull a building permit at 11 o'clock at night in your house, fill it out, and submit it. We're still not even close to being there. A lot of these things drive how many work hours have to be devoted to them. So those are the kinds of things I know with Pete and I served. That's what you really had to delve into, is how are we doing what we're doing? Is there a better way of doing it? And is there a cheaper way of doing it? And still getting the same result. So we're not going to solve the entire problem that you pitched right now just by us talking for 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I agree with Don on some of it. You can either cut or you can charge the residents. Right? It's the only 2 options. I don't think our population is going to grow significantly to help offset what our current population is paying for taxes. I will say this, though. There is an awful lot of state and federal money available. And our town has let our housing production plan and our open space and real estate plans expire back in 2016. And what that does is that prevents the town of Harwich from being able to even apply for grants. I know we're talking about a lot of money here, $77 million, but in my view, every penny counts, every grant. You look at what the fire department does on a routine basis during selectmen meetings. They stand up and they say, we've gotten another grant. And I will say, sitting in that seat over there is my mother-in-law, who's written plenty and plenty of grants. It's a specialized, real specialized set of skills. And I'd like to find somebody and identify somebody in the town of Harwich who has those skills, because that's low-hanging fruit. That's money that can help offset the taxes that we have to pay. But we do live in a desirable area. People are going to want to come here. Nothing today costs the same as it did 10 years ago. Forecast, plan, strategize, be on top of things. I hope that answers at least a little bit of your question. Thank you.
Pete?
You have to ask questions. You have to figure out if there's a true need or is it just a want. And you have to be able to give the difficult answer of no on occasion. There isn't an easy answer to cutting a budget, reducing a budget, or trying to minimize its growth. But it's a collective work. It's a work that takes thought, it takes foresight, and again, it takes the ability to say no on occasion. I'll be as brief as I can. You know, one of the things I heard at town meeting, and I've heard it other places, is the foregone conclusion that Prop 2.5 exists, and so they can automatically raise your taxes 2.5% each year. It's true they have the right, but do they have the need? And that's another question that's not often asked. Because they have the right to raise your taxes 2.5% doesn't mean there's an actual need. So we look at what's proposed, and we do our damnedest to keep it as affordable as possible for the residents of Harwich and those that have called this home for their entire lives.
All right, thank you. Number 14.
I do not need the mic.
She said that to her husband, by the way.
Pleasant Lake Avenue. Of course, I'm asking about housing. And I want to know right now, as you said, we have to know where to build, but we have to, it's equally important to know where not to build. And single-family homes aren't going to cut it. How do you feel about density?
So the response here is Jeff, Pete, and
Thank you, Elizabeth. Great question. I'm a fan of density as long as it's respectful and it fits into the character and the charm of what our town already has. I think Chloe's path, that does not suit me for density. I think that does not fit. And that's the easiest example that I can give right now to something that I would not support at all and fight as hard as I could to not see that happen. I think what's happening over in West Harwich at the old schoolhouse, where a private citizen is trying to create 7 to 10 units in an existing building and then another smaller building, I think that fits. I think that's respectful, character, charm. I think it screams Harwich. It's going to repurpose an old building that is an eyesore, it's dilapidated, it's falling down. But that poor gentleman has been in the process for over a year, maybe 2 years. And I got an email from him last night, just coincidentally. And I couldn't believe that his stormwater management plan needs more review. He hasn't even filed for a building permit. So to answer your question, I think there needs to be an awful lot of thought given to the properties we already have and how they can best suit and fit into our town's charm while keeping the environment first on the list in terms of not taxing our environment or our resources. But building one home at a time is not going to be the answer, and it's going to cost an awful lot more money than we need to spend. So that's my position on it, and I would love to sit in one of those 5 seats and just dive into this and bring it straight down into the dirt and figure out how to do it.
Pete.
Thank you.
Yeah, Pete.
tricky question, right? Because density impacts the environment. That's what we're talking about. And so it's a balancing act. So you try to find the right areas, you try to find the right locations that make sense, but having, my office is located in Hyannis, and I don't know if anybody's driven on Independence Park and seen the Everlay building or a few of the other developments there. That's clearly not in the character of Harwich. And so I wouldn't propose that we erect structures such as that on town land. However, single-family units, again, to your point, are not the answer. So we need to minimize the density impact on certain areas. We need to identify areas, such as the Marceline property that's been already identified as an opportunity to build units that are more than one at a time and take advantage of that opportunity. And continue to find areas such as that throughout town. It's a challenge to create affordable housing and maintain the character that you have in certain areas without upsetting the neighbors, right? It's the NIMBY situation. Nobody wants it in their backyard, but unless we're willing to have true conversations and understand the implications of doing things or not doing things, then we're going to continue to face this trouble 20, 30, 40 years down the road, as we are now.
Don?
Well, Elizabeth, you and I have talked about this in the past. There really is no one solution for things. Harwich does have a tremendous history of repurposing. Town Hall was the Cape Cod Bank and Trust and the Cape Cod 5. That's why the two front doors are that way. We've done a marvelous job. I know Duncan and I have talked about how we could do better in allowing reuses of older buildings because you don't have to build new all the time. But I will say that, again, getting back to the Marceline property, that when I was acting chair, it took us less than 6 months to buy 14 acres of land that was across the street from a bus station, that was bounded by the major highway on Cape Cod and 2 other major roadways. The density would make sense there. Jimmy would have wanted that. Jimmy was on his own affordable housing program through the years, where he would build things and he'd rent to buy. We've kind of lost our sense of movement here. The bureaucracy, the 700 days that Jeff talked about, is just stultifying to me. I don't understand how we could be having so much discussion about what page of the contract this addendum should be in. We've lost our sense of direction. There really needs to be some action taken. And I think that there's 2 properties I could think of, and Marceline's one of them, where if we build what we should, a small community there, not just a whole bunch of houses, that we could wind up with being over our 10% goal, and in pretty short order, without ruining the character of the town. The question I have being inside is, why? Why hasn't that happened? And again, I'm only part of a team, but I'm going to still jump up and down until I start seeing some action.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. The final question goes to number 15, which I think is right there.
I'm Lauren Moore. I'm starting to get into this stuff now that I'm somewhat retired. Thank you, Mark. I'll let you pick the question. I have some opinions. First of all, I want to say...
You need a question, so not
Okay.
17
I'll take the
opinions.
easier one.
What the book?
They need a question.
That's the question. Oh, sorry. The respect thing. We each have our own gifts. Lack of respect. Everybody's got a different point of view. That may have been the most respectful thing anybody has said. And some people are like offended by it. I choose to not be offended. Try to offend me, you cannot. If you can be offended, that's up to you, what I say. That's my opinion. Good night, moon. Buy it now. The whole tech dumping in the bay. I have a new idea for a whole tech. Fill swimming pools. What do you think about filling swimming pools instead of the bay?
Wouldn't need lights.
Lori,
Here
let's
you
get-
go.
let's
That's
get
a
to-
question
Lori,
right there.
Lori,
I'm
sorry,
almost
let's
there.
get to a
Harwich
single
Port,
question.
new building,
Lori,
speaking
a
and
single
volunteering
question,
is
please.
personality and character. Please zoning change before that? What's up with that? Why does that take so long? Have those people been working on those for how many years? And it's taken us how many years to change it?
Lori, do you have a single question, please? Help us out. Do you have a single question?
No, I have like 15,000.
Well, okay, but you only allowed one. Duncan,
May I claim question number 4?
can you what?
May I claim question number 4?
No, we
A
passed
trip to
that.
Cape Breton is $3,000 more than a trip to Galway, that's what I'm.
Yeah,
Closing statements.
okay. Okay, so look, we're at the point of, we'd like to have 1 to 2 minutes of a wrap up.
Sure.
Your elevator speech, if you will, the reason why people should consider you when they go, to the ballot box, that type of thing. So we're going to do it in the reverse order in which we started this whole thing. So in that case, Jeff, you'll be first, Don second, and Pete will be the final one.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you all for coming. This really was, I think, productive, and for me, it was a lot of fun. I'm the only candidate here who can say these things, these 4 things. I touch on a daily basis at ground zero all 4 demographics, pretty much, of our town. I have a 1st and 2nd grader, so the school system is very, very important to me. I have a 23-year-old who just graduated from college. He's home, got a job with a local business. Housing is our topic of conversation every day. I'm in the 3rd demographic, raising a young family, business owner. I employ people. I know the compression and the struggle that group of people feels on a daily basis. And the one that breaks my heart is our seniors, my parents' peers. Parents are retired. They're on a fixed income. And the financial uncertainty and insecurity that they feel on a daily basis, and the people that I've spoken to, their peers, is extremely troubling to them and extremely troubling to me. So as I sit before you, I'm perfectly positioned as I'm dealing with these 4 giant demographics on a daily basis, sometimes minute to minute, as you could probably all imagine. I'm open-minded, I'll listen, I will educate myself. You will always know, after I cast a vote, that I've done my homework and that I've listened to anybody and everybody who wants to have a say. Lastly, wastewater, housing, long games. It's going to take a long time, a lot of money. But we can't forget about the day-to-day quality of life that the people in Harwich need to be able to enjoy. And I believe some of the things that I can do as a selectman can move us along our way to a better quality of life on a day-to-day basis. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. Don?
Actually, I'm going to correct Jeff. I live the 4th demographic, and I've got a girl in the 9th grade. I've had kids that went through the Harwich High School. My son lives in Yarmouth, and he works on the Cape. So I'm there with you. I'm not a surprise. I mean, I've been honored to be a selectman for you folks for just about 12 years now, in 2 different stints. There's no way for me to recreate myself. I think I've been pretty fair. I try to deal with things with both my heart and my head. And I think I've done a pretty good job through the years. No one in this room can stand up and say that they've totally agreed with me on everything. But no one is going to be able to stand up in this room and say that he just totally ignored me and they didn't listen. I've always been there listening. I've appointed people to boards who actually came back to me and said, I can't believe that you appointed me. You and I don't agree on stuff. And that's precisely the point. You've got to be willing to have people who challenge your positions, who challenge what you stand for. And you've got to be able to move along and grow as a person. And me growing as a person helps the town because I represent you. I would be grateful if you gave me 1 or your 2 votes on May 16th and returned me. But again, I have a history. And if you don't like what I've done, then don't vote for me. But if you do like that I represent some of the things that you folks are thinking of and may not be the prevailing thought process in the Board of Selectmen, I think it's really important to have somebody there who's willing to challenge their orthodoxy and give a different perspective. And I would be honored if you gave me your vote.
Thank you, and I appreciate everybody coming out today on such a beautiful day. I believe that my civic and professional background qualify me to serve in this office once again. I believe that having the best interest for all of Harwich, without any hidden agendas, without any allegiance to anybody else, makes me qualified to serve in the office. There is a unique perspective that needs to be taken when you sit at the selectmen's table. And as we alluded to earlier, you can't be a person with thin skin who's going to take things personally and develop an attitude towards certain segments of the population. I guarantee you that if you were to provide me with one of your 2 votes on May 16th, I'd be the person to demand respect, to have an open form of government, and to act in the best interest of Harwich. Thank you very much.